The United States has reached a trade agreement with the European Union (EU). The US will reduce the tariff rate with the EU from 30% to 15%. In exchange, the EU is set to invest $6 billion in the US economy. This deal is similar to the one reached with Japan. South Korea's Deputy Prime Minister Koo Yoon-chul will sit down for final negotiations with the U.S. Treasury Secretary on Thursday, just one day before the deadline for tariff negotiations. For the first story on MBN, reporter Lee Hannah shares the details.
The mutual tariff rate on the EU by the US has been set at 15%. Back in April, President Trump announced a 20% reciprocal tariff on the EU, but on the 12th, he raised the pressure to 30% before finally settling on a significantly reduced rate as part of a trade agreement. President Trump said a uniform 15% tariff applies to all goods, including EU-made vehicles, and the EU will invest $600 billion USD, roughly 830 trillion Korean won, in the US economy. It's similar to the agreement made with Japan on the 22nd.
Good news. We've reached a deal. It's a good deal for everybody, I believe.
Stabilized on a single 15% tariff rate for the vast majority of EU exports. 15% is not to be underestimated, but it is the best we could get.
Ahead of the impending tariff implementation this Friday, the US will first hold its third high-level trade negotiations with China. In preparation for the impending tariff deadline, South Korea is expected to hold its final negotiations with the US just one day prior. Deputy Prime Minister Koo Yoon-chul is set to meet US Treasury Secretary Scott Bessent for talks in Washington on the 31st local US time. Foreign Minister Cho Hyun is also expected to meet with U.S. Secretary of State Marco Rubio around the 31st to discuss the development of the South Korea-U.S. alliance and provide indirect support for the tariff negotiations. If the 25% mutual tariff rate is enforced, South Korea's GDP is projected to decrease by up to 0.4%. The government is expected to make a final all-out effort to prevent this outcome. This is Lee Hannah, MBN News.